the Cook. A historical fiction of love, identity and fate by S.J. Jeppsson. Chapter 36. The Widow. Just a few days after Catherine Cook had arrived at Wetherby House, word had spread that John Jacob Astor's body had been found, recovered from the sea by the Mackay Bennett. His name, whispered in drawing rooms and printed in bold across newspapers, was a constant reminder that tragedy lingered even in the glow of fresh engagements and golden halls. The world did not pause for love or celebration, not when tragedy still cast its long shadow. And at the first break of dawn, on the very day Kate Cook, as Lydia Wetherby, was to become the bride of Lord Thomas Hollingsworth, New York City gathered for another rite entirely. The funeral of John Jacob Astor IV, whose body the sea had at last surrendered. While society prepared its silks and jewels for the wedding on Fifth Avenue, black carriages crept toward Trinity Church in the drizzle, carrying mourners in heavy veils. Two ceremonies, rising side by side in the same city, one to sanctify a future, the other to bury a past. New York City, May 4th, 1912. The rain fell in a quiet, unrelenting drizzle, misting the black-clad mourners as they stepped from their carriages onto the wet pavement outside Trinity Church. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and wilting lilies, the sound of carriage wheels clattering over slick cobblestones, blending with the solemn tolling of the church bell. J.J. Astor, one of the wealthiest men in America, a man who had built empires of steel and luxury, was being laid to rest beneath a sky as grey as the sea that had swallowed him whole. Kate stood at the edge of the gathered elite, her gloved hands clasped before her, feeling the weight of the moment press against her chest. Beside her, Thomas stood tall, his jaw set, his hands tucked firmly behind his back, a man raised in duty and expectation, in the quiet understanding of what was required of him. To her left, Margaret Wetherby dabbed delicately at the corner of her eye with a black lace handkerchief, while Charles Wetherby bowed his head in quiet respect. A few paces beyond them, the Earl and Countess of Grantham stood together in measured silence, their presence a mark of the deep ties now binding two great houses across the sea. The tragedy of the Titanic had sent shockwaves through the world, but among the gilded halls of the wealthy, it was Astor's loss that struck the deepest. A man of such stature, reduced to a name on a list of the dead. It was a reminder that even the richest among them were not untouchable. The doors of the church stood open, revealing flickering candlelight and wreaths of white roses arranged in elegant symmetry near the altar. The murmurs of the gathered mourners blended with the hush of the falling rain, whispers of grief and speculation curling through the crowd like smoke. And then Kate saw her, Madeline Astor. Seated in the front pew, dressed in mourning black from the tip of her veil to the hem of her silk gown, the young widow sat motionless, her hands resting over the soft swell of her stomach, the child she carried, the last piece of her husband left in this world. She was only 19, barely more than a girl herself. Kate swallowed against the tightness in her throat, watching as Madeline remained impossibly still. The sheer weight of her sorrow hung around her like a veil, heavier than the one she wore. Beside her, Thomas shifted, exhaling a slow breath, his eyes trained on the grieving widow.
She is so young to be left alone,
he murmured, the words barely audible over the hush of the rain. Kate nodded slightly, but she could not look away. She had seen mourning before, had witnessed the rituals of grief, the quiet acceptance of loss. But this was something different. This was raw, quiet devastation, the kind that did not weep or wail, but simply was. A bishop in flowing vestments stepped forward, his voice sonorous as he recited the words of scripture that had comforted the grieving for centuries.
Many waters cannot quench love, neither can the floods drown it.
Kate's breath caught in her throat. The words, spoken with solemn reverence, drifted through the vaulted ceilings, settling into the bones of those gathered to mourn. They carried across the pews, past the sombre faces, beyond the flickering candles, until they reached Madeline. And still, she did not move. Kate had heard whispers about the Astors on the Titanic. She remembered how Lydia had told her the world had scandalized itself over the marriage of a powerful man in his late 40s to a girl barely out of school. How their love had been dissected in parlours and printed in newspapers, debated and dismissed as the whims of a foolish girl and a man clinging to youth. But there was no foolishness here. No scandal. Only a widow who had loved her husband, who had watched him place her into a lifeboat, who had been forced to sail forward into life without him. Thomas remained silent beside her, but Kate could sense his thoughts, the weight of duty, of loss, of the quiet, careful understanding of what it meant to uphold one's place in a world that demanded so much. Kate tore her gaze away, swallowing the tightness in her throat. She had lost so much in the disaster, but she had not lost love. Not in the way Madeline had. As the funeral concluded, the coffin of a titan of industry disappeared into the rain, swallowed by the crowd and the waiting earth. Kate stood motionless, her breath shallow beneath her veil. Around her, the Weatherbees and the Granthams offered final courtesies to the bereaved, their expressions sober, their words few. One bride had been left behind to walk the world alone. Another was being carried forward toward vows she had not yet spoken. Vows chosen, it seemed, less by her own heart than by fate's quiet hand. Two brides from entirely different worlds, bound by the same merciless sea.